So I'm a terrible, terrible hoarder of papers, especially the beautiful ones. I find it really hard to use them. So I'm trying to make myself a little bit accountable um, and use them by creating this project using the beautiful palette papers by Tim Holtz. Um, I'm absolutely in love with these papers. And I think they're so versatile because there are so many small elements that you can actually cut out and use to create all manner of clusters and things. I've created these little um, paper clips. So I'm trying to choose which papers to use, and that's not an easy job, is it? um, but I will eventually pick the papers. For this project that I'm using, that I'm making, sorry, you're going to need two pieces of 12 by 12 to start off with. So I'm going to choose two pieces from the palette charcoal collection that I think work really nicely. And I'm going to cut one of the pieces, my central panel, I'm going to cut to 10 by 12. And then the two side panels, I'm going to cut to 5 by 12. And then I'm going to adhere the two side panels to the central panel. So there we go. I'm just cutting them now. That's it. Just the thing is just deciding where you want which pattern. That's the main thing with this part of the project. And of course, you could just put the two pieces together. I mean, you're aiming at your final piece of paper being 12 inches by about approximately 18 inches wide. So I guess as long as you've kind of got that, you can work with that. But I thought it looked nicer having the same pattern on the sides, because the sides will form the flaps that come over the journal. So I thought that would be quite a nice look. So I'm just going to line these up now and adhere them to the main panel. And, just popping some glue on there. There we are, making sure it's all lined up. And I've worked the measurements, so you have got about, you've got an inch of overlap there that you can play around with. But I think an inch gives a nice secure adhesion. Adhesion, is that a word? That will do. To the paper, because you want it to be quite firm. And we are going to reinforce these overlaps as well to make sure that they're not going anywhere. That's it. I'm just turning it over now. I'm trying to decide really which side I want to be my outside of the project and which side I want to be the inside, because they're both rather nice. I've actually, in the end, I've gone for this being the inside of my journal. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my scoreboard and start scoring. And this is the main reason I've done the voiceover, because I did have a slight issue with my measurements in the live, because I changed one and forgotten that it would have a knock-on effect with all my other measurements. So not very clever of me. But I'm hoping to put that right with this. And I've also got a blog post that's got all the correct measurements on it as well. But I'm going to start off going down the edges, and I'm scoring at 2¼ and 2½. So that's 2¼ and 2½. And you're going to do that on both sides. And because this paper is really way too long to fit on most scoreboards, what you have to do is you have to flip it over and come from the other end as well, and then your scores will meet together. So that's how I worked that. So that's one side, and now I'm just going to do the other side. And these are going to end up being our flaps in our folio. So just scoring along, making sure the paper's nice and straight in the scoreboard, and sticking to one side to do my scoring as well, because I sometimes find if I use the other side, I don't always get an accurate measurement, and that's probably down to user error on my part. But I find if I stick to the same score lines, that helps me to get a more accurate measurement. So I'm just making sure it's nice and straight in there and finishing off that second score. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about folding those scores just yet. I'm going to turn my paper around and I'm going to start doing some more scores. Now, what you're going to see on screen and what you're going to hear is going to differ slightly, because I had to change the measurements so that the folio would work. So you're going to score at, I think here I'm starting with the central score. So for the central score with the correct measurements, you're looking at 9 1/8, and then scoring at 9 5/8. And that's going to give you your spine. And then I'm going back and I'm scoring at 4 1/4 inches and 4 3/4 inches. And then I can either turn, I think probably the most sensible thing to do then is to flip paper over to the other side to get the longer scores, and you're going to score those at 3 3/8 and 3 7/8. So scores in total along that edge are 4 1/4 inches, 3 3/4 inches, 9 1/8 of an inch, 9 5/8 of an inch, and then you're going to turn the paper over and do 3 3/8 of an inch and 3 7/8 of an inch. And then I'm taking my scissors and I'm just, or you could use a craft knife if you prefer, and I'm going to cut out the 4 corners. And I'm going past the second score line around each edge, and I'm just cutting out those sections, and I'll do that in all 4 corners. So it just takes a little moment, but I'll cut those corners out, but I'll hold on to them because they're going to make great tuck spots. Now, somebody who was watching the video said, wouldn't it be great to, you could actually keep those scored edges and cut the corner off, and you would have more of a pocket because you'd have that, you'd obviously have that little edge. And I think that's a great idea if you fancy that style. I was actually a little bit mindful not to do that because I was concerned about bulk, because I'm going to be adding a few other elements to this as we go along, and I wasn't sure if it would all fit in. But it, you know, do whatever floats your boat. And here I'm cutting the central sections out here, just going down past the second score lines and cutting out the pieces on either side of the spine as well. That's it. And that's the sort of shape you're going to have, except yours will be a slightly more even and not quite not quite as off as mine was. And that's a lesson for me on checking my measurements more. But like I said, I did put it together quite quickly in the morning and was just looking for shortcuts to make it easier, really. And that's a lesson learned for me. I'm using my corner rounder on all the corners because that's a look I like. If you don't like rounded corners, don't round them. It's purely personal choice and it doesn't affect how your folio will work in any way. It's just an aesthetic. So there we are, just chopping those corners off. There you go. It's a little bit of a faff, but I think it's worth it. It's something I really like on my folio type projects. But equally, if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. And I suppose you could do different finishes as well, couldn't you? You could mitre the corners and things like that. That would be nice. So now I'm just going to go along all my folds. And I think it's at some point along this line that I realise that my measurements are a little bit out. And in the original video, if you get to see it, I do, you know, I do sort of mess about and work that out and get it working again. And I also do allude to the fact that I will be putting more accurate measurements on my blog. So there is a solution, and we do get there in the end. So there we are, just folding along all of those score lines to get everything to work nicely. I do love making these folios with flaps. I think it's a really nice way of making sure any bits and bobs that you put in your folio stay in your folio. So I folded it up centrally like that and realised that it's not quite right. But actually, the measurements that I've figured out, you'll get one of the flaps will go inside and one of the flaps will go outside and come around the outside of your folio. And you can see that in the final photos that I've added online and on the blog. Yeah. So here I am. I'm just trying to work out where exactly I went wrong, and the penny finally drops and I work it out then. And then I took all the final measurements from this off camera so that I could give them to you, because obviously it's a bit of a faffy process working these things out, but I got there in the end. So, and hopefully I've managed to save you a bit of faff as well. So there we go. I'm just trying to sort this out now and make it work. So I'm cutting a bit off. But if you go by the new measurements that I've just given you in this video, all the measurements that are on the blog, which are exactly the same as these measurements, you won't have to go through all of this faff. You know, it is what it is. What can you do? And it's a good reminder that if you change one measurement, you need to then change all the other measurements. Oh, I thought I was being really clever and saving everybody a faff with the overlaps. But no, I actually created a whole heap more work, and I would have been better sticking to my original measurement. But what can you do? What can you do? So I'm just snipping those extra bits off now. You know, correcting my mistake in real time. So happy days. So I'm going to cut that bit out. There we go. And then I'll go back in with the corner rounder. And there we are. Let's just get that finished off, and it should fold up quite nicely. There we are. That's it. Just folding things up, making sure things look right. Yes, that looks right. Yes, that looks right. Need to just reinforce the new score line that I created. There we go. And then once I've reinforced those folds and got everything looking good and working properly, what I do then is I get some washi tape, and I've actually used fabric washi tape for this, but you can use any washi tape, or even some thin tape or thin paper, anything you want. Some people like to use Tyvek, whichever is your preference. I mean, I've gone for the tape because it's sort of decorative and looks nice, and you can see how that flap folds over there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reinforce all of the overlaps, and I will reinforce the spine as well at some point. I didn't do it in this video, but I will be doing it. Reinforcing all those pieces with the tape, and I actually am going to add some glue as well, some adhesive along those overlaps that I'm going to put the tape on, because that's going to help. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself, sorry. And here I'm going to add the little tuck pockets, and that's all I've done them as, is just tuck pockets. I haven't made them massively functional. They'll just hold some other elements that I'm going to create. And I've rounded the corners on opposite corners of those pieces of card, and that will then work nice as a tuck. And I'm just going to add glue to the two edges so that I can adhere the tuck in place. There we go. That's it. Oh, that works nicely. I like that. These papers are just absolutely stunning, and I'm really looking forward to using elements of the multicolored papers with these now, because I think they'll just really pop. I think it's going to be a really nice look. So I'm just doing the other tuck spot there. There we go, just popping it in and rounding the corners on opposite sides, you know, on an opposite diagonal, because that will just fit in nicely to the space that I've got there. So pop that in. And if you wanted to, of course, you could use the other corners we cut out to do further pockets or tuck spots on those flaps if you wanted to. I have got a little plan for what I'm going to do with it, and you'll see over the future videos that I do what actually happens. So I think now I'm going to go back to doing the reinforcement with the tape. Hopefully that's it. Yeah, it all folds up nicely. And yes, I'm going to get my tape and pop that. There we go. We'll pop that in place. So I'm going to do both sides so that it gets really nicely reinforced. So I think I'm just doing the outside here on this video, but You can obviously do the outside, the inside, and of course the spine, because we'll be adding lots of elements and it will get lots of use and lots of opening and closing. So you really want to make sure you protect those edges and joins and folds and things, so that it can have lots and lots of use and still stay in one piece. Because, you know, these sort of projects are ones that you come back to and add bits, and, you know, they do get a lot of use. So I'm just adding that. And like I said before, with the tape, make sure you add adhesive as well, because that's going to keep that tape in place and make sure it's a good, firm reinforcement. So there we go, just doing that one as well. That one as well. And then I do the spine on the outside as well. And then I'll worry about the inside as I do future projects within this folio, and as we start to finish it off, which I'm really excited about. I've got some, I mean, I'm excited. I don't know if you will be, but I've got some exciting ideas about what I want to put in there. And hopefully I'll have a new video coming up in not too long. It will certainly be next week that I'll have a new video detailing the next bit that I do. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. There we go. Just trimming that washi tape off. And I'm not sure where that washi tape's from. I suspect it might be Tim Holtz, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's a fabric one. And there is, on the Art Inspirations website, there is a great Dina Wakley fabric tape for making books and things like that. And it's completely plain, but you could stamp on it and do some really nice things to customize your own fabric tape. There you go. Just making sure everything works how we want it to work. That's fantastic. There we go. And next up, I'm going to talk about these little paper clips that I really like making, and you can make them with any paper clips once you kind of know the basic principles. So I'm using some of the ornaments that I've got left from creating the folio and some other little scraps I've got. And you really can use, I mean, the tiniest of pieces. And well, you won't, in the next video I'll be showing you I've got I've got the tiniest little tiny bits. And yeah, I'm not they're not going in the bin. They're going to be used in one way or another. And so here I'm just grabbing a piece out, or a piece or two out from the multi-pack as well, because there's just so many lovely elements on there that you can cut out and use. And this is the 8x8 pad I'm using for the multi, because, you know, there's so much on there. I really don't need to use a 12x12 sheet for that. Right, and then I'm going to do this. If you follow the principles, you can use it for any size paper clip. So I've got a few different sized ones there, and I'm going to decide which one I'm going to use, and then I'll show you the principles. So I've got my pencil to help me, And I'm going to take a piece of paper and I'm going to fold it in half. And, you know, I mean, you could do it in a far more frugal way, I'm sure. But I'm just going to fold a piece of paper in half and then I'm going to pop the paper clip on, because what I'm doing is I'm looking for the bottom edge of the paper clip. So here we go. Which paper clip? I'm going to take the small one, I think, in the end. Yes. I'm going to take the small one because you can get a pretty decent sized um, paper clip. Does that make sense? So here we go. Folding that paper in half, and then I'm going to be able to see where the bottom of the paper clip is. And you can do this with any size paper clip. So there we are, just looking for the bottom. That's it. And then I'm going to cut across. Once I know where the bottom of the paper clip is, I'm going to cut across to exactly that measurement, because we want this piece of paper to be the exact length of the paper clip. And we also want it to be much narrower, or at least a bit narrower than the piece of paper that we're going to use on the outside. This is the inner bit of the paper clip, if you like. So there we go. I'm trimming it down to the size I want, because it doesn't need to be particularly big. And then I'm going to pop my paper clip on there, and that's ready then to have a bigger piece adhered to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take another piece of paper, or cardstock, or whatever you're using, and it's going to be wider than this piece. And I also want it to have more height than this piece, because one thing I really like doing with these paper clips is I really like adding an eyelet at the top. And sometimes I'll add bits to my eyelet, or sometimes I'll just leave it as an eyelet. But I think it's a nice effect. And even if you don't like adding an eyelet, it's quite nice to have, you know, a bit more substance to your paper clip. So I'm rounding my corners before I stick anything, because once you've stuck it all together, that makes it just a little bit trickier. So there we go, that's all done. Making sure it's nicely folded, and then make sure that fits in there. And I'm going to add some glue to one side. I do one side at a time with this. So making sure that the glue gets all over the paper clip and is going to be firmly stuck in there. So making sure that that is right down to the edge as well. That's it. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side, making sure it's plenty of adhesive. And then I'm going to fold it down and I'm going to push in to all of the little nooks and crannies of the paper clip as much as I can, because I want that paper clip to be firmly wedged in there, really. There we go. I'm just putting my pin back in my glue, which is not always as easy as I'd like it to be. And then I'm going to just look at this as a base and think about what other elements I want to put on there. And there are so many. So I'm just looking through my scraps and deciding what I'm going to add. And on this sort of mothy, I think it's moths scrap that I've got here, there are a few full elements on it. So I'm going to cut one of those out. I'm not being too precious about it or worrying about antennae and things like that. I'm just cutting out the basic shape. There we go. It won't take long. She says, hopefully. That's it, just cutting that little bit out. And, you know, it's worth holding on to all of your little scraps for smaller projects like this, because it's surprising how they come in handy. There we go, just doing that. And then I'm going to look at some of the other elements and decide what I'm going to layer up and where. Now, there are some strips that I want to use. And in order to use some elements from it, I'm going to cut the strips first. Oh no, I'm going in for an eyelet. Sorry, I'm going in for an eyelet first. So I'm just rooting around in my little drawer, and I've got an eyelet, and I've got my crocodile, and I'm just going to add an eyelet to the top corner before I start sticking papers on, because that way I know my eyelet's in place, and I can work around where it is. So I'll just make my hole, pop my eyelet in, and then use my crocodile to set the eyelet. I think I had a little bit of confusion with that. I'm sorry, that's going off the screen there. But there we go, I'll get that sorted out, and then I'll set my eyelet. And let's do that. Yeah, sorry, that's off the screen and not much for you to see there. There we go. So that's all done. And now at this stage, I'm just going to see what I'm going to do next. I'm going to ink all the edges because, you know, everything looks better with a good inking, doesn't it? Well, if you like inking, of course, and if you don't like inking, don't ink. It's not mandatory, and it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I really like to do it. So I'm looking at some of these. That's it. So I'm looking at these strips, looking for pieces I want to use. Now, before I take the elements, I'm actually going to cut along the strips, because that way then when I'm getting individual elements, I'm not risking damaging the other strips, because they are rather magnificent. And also some of them will be perfect for belly bands and things like that. And if I go tearing into them, then that's going to put an end to that, isn't it? So I definitely recommend cutting the strips first. And then you can look through them and take the pieces that you want to take. So I'll have a look in a minute, because there's a piece of a playing card that I really liked and I thought would be really nice as a little base on my paper clip. So I'm just ripping that little piece off, and then I'm going to ink the edges, I think. No, I'm trimming it off. That's it. That fits nicely. And we'll give it a little bit of an ink, because we don't want the harsh white edges. So just inking that out. And then that's going to sit nicely there. So I'm going to glue that in place. And there we go. I love that little bit of a playing card, with the contrast on the background. I'm just bringing you in a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing, because this is quite a small piece. There we go. And then I'm going to look at the other elements that I want to add. So I quite like a little piece of this. It's like a swatch paper, and I'm going to ink the edges on that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we do these layers. This is my base layer, and sometimes we don't see we don't see everything that's on the 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 first layer or two because we're putting other things on it. But they add so much depth and texture and make such a difference that I think it's really important not to be perturbed by the fact that you might not see everything that you've put on there. I'm just adding a little bit of gauze there just to add some texture. And these are little threads that I save when I'm using my sewing machine. I save a little bit of thread here and there, and I keep them in my drawer, and then I can add them to things. And I think that adds another element of interest and texture. So I'm looking at that, and there's this, I want to put a little sort of central image on there. I think I'm going to cut that out shortly. Oh no, I'm going to add some little tickets and stamps, because there are little tickets and stamps within these designs, which is just, I mean, it's amazing, really, the amount of ephemera that's in these papers that you can just cut out and use. I absolutely love that design feature. And because they're from the paper collections, it means they're going to go with your projects as well. So it's a win-win, really. It's so cleverly designed. Yes, Mr. Tim Holtz knows what he's doing. So I've added a little ticket, and I'm going to add a little something else now as well. I think I'm going to add a little stamp. Or maybe a stamp or two, I'm not sure. Just to give it a little something else. So I'm just cutting them out. I'm not being too precious about how I'm cutting them out, because I'm going to ink the edges and they're quite small, so they don't need to be terribly detailed. Yeah, I'll just cut those out now, and then we'll ink them, and then we'll be away. I've gone off out of the way. There I am. I'm back. There we are. So I've got my stamps. And like I said, you don't need to worry about being too fussy with how you cut these. There is a crinkle edge, but oh my goodness, that would be a lot of work. So I'm just cutting them out simply and inking the edges, and then I'm going to position them on my project. And once they're in place, I'm going to start thinking about I want a main focal point. So let's get those in position. So I'm sort of creating the space for my focal point. So sometimes I'll go in and tuck little things in afterwards, but in this instance, I've actually put the little things in place, ready to receive a focal point. So I'm just looking at some papers now. I'm looking through, looking for the image that I want, and I found the image that I want. So let's get that. And what I've found is I've found a photograph that I want to use. But what I find when I cut this out, which I will do shortly, and there we go, I'm very careful to cut along the strip before I get to the image that I want to cut out, because I don't want to destroy the strips on either side. Really and truly, I should have followed my own rule and used my trimmer and just cut all the strips out. But I was trying to save some time there. So there we go. So I've got my image that I've cut out. And what I found is if I put that on there, I lose a lot of the background. And I really don't want to lose all of that background, because some of it is really nice. And I'll have a little faff and a think. And then what I decide to do which is a really good idea if you've done a really nice background and you don't want to lose too much of it and you want to add an image like this, you can just cut the image out of the paper and then add it to your design. And that way you're going to leave some of those elements of design that are in the first layers are going to come through, and you're going to get to enjoy those as well. So I'm just cutting him out. There he is, and popping him on, and I'm really happy with how he sits there. So I'm just going to ink him up a little bit so that there's no stark edges to him. So let's get him inked. And there we are. He'll be ready to sit on top of there. And once I get him sitting on top of there, I have a think about that, the moth that I cut out and how I'm going to use that on here. And actually, I think that that would make some really great wings for this character that I've stuck to the front of my paper clip. So I'm just going to come to that conclusion shortly. Yep, there we go. So I'm just cutting the wings off, and I'm going to tuck them behind him. So now he can fly if he wants to. And I really like that overall look. I do enjoy adding wings to all manner of characters and things and all sorts. Everything benefits from a wing, doesn't it? So there we go. They're tucked in, and I'm really happy with that. And so just making sure everything is nicely adhered and not going anywhere. And then I'm going to get some jump rings. I've got a couple of different sizes. I'm just on a little ink. And then I'm going to get my jump rings. I've got 2 different sizes that I like to use when I'm doing little dangly bits. So I'm going to get those, and I'm also going to use my long nose pliers to help with the job. But one of the things that I do find sometimes is sometimes you can get away with using your fingers if it's all getting a bit fiddly and faffy. So it's really important to remember when you're using jump rings, don't pull them apart, just push it to the side rather than pulling apart. If you push it to the side, it's much easier to put back together, and also you won't compromise the integrity of the jump ring. So it will remain a good, strong ring. So there we go. I'm trying to just put those back together, and it's, it can be a little bit fluffy, but it's well worth doing. There we go. I'm just getting in there with my hands now and closing that jump ring. So that's hanging on there. And I'm going to get a little charm to dangle off. Excuse me. So I've gone for a little, these are little Mexican flaming hearts that are quite cute. I'm going to use those. And I may go back at a later date and use some alcohol ink on that charm, actually, because it's quite a bright silver for me. And I do like things a little bit more grungy generally. So I might go in and add some colour. So I'm getting another jump ring here. In total, I think I used 3 jump rings on this project. I used one large one through the main eyelet, And then I use two smaller ones, one on the heart and then another one to join it to the larger jump ring. And that worked really well and gives it a nice dangle. You can, you can actually, if you don't use enough jump rings, you're going to have something that sits quite tightly to your eyelet, which if that's what you want, great. But if you want it to have a little bit of movement, then you want to put, a good a good couple of jump rings on there to give it the movement. So I'm quite happy with that. And as you can see, it will just slide onto your paper now, and you can use your paper clip. Um, and they're great for decorating all manner of items, and they're really useful as well because they'll hold things in place. So you can't really go wrong with that, can you? So that's that project finished, and the folio is finished. And really and truly, all that's left now is to make some more videos and explore some more elements that I want to put into the folio. So I'll have another video really soon showing how I've carried on with this folio. And I hope you'll have a go at it. And I hope you have a go at the paper clips or the paper clips, because they are really useful. And once you suss them out, that's it. You can make them with any size of paper clip and have lots of fun doing it. It's a really versatile project. So hopefully I'll see you soon. And there we go.